The goblin blade slid across my finger, and the drop of blood that fell into the obsidian basin sounded far too loud in the silent chamber beneath Gringotts. It was a small sound, barely more than a soft tap, but it echoed against the ancient stone walls like the beginning of something enormous. I remember thinking that a single drop of blood should not feel like the opening moment of a storm. The chamber around me was dim, lit only by cold green lanterns that burned with enchanted flame. Shadows stretched long across the stone floor, and the air smelled of iron dust and something far older, like the breath of a crypt that had not been opened in centuries. The goblin banker across the table, Griphook, watched the basin with the quiet patience of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times before. To him, this was routine, a blood inheritance test, a standard procedure for wizarding heirs claiming their family vaults. I had come to Gringotts expecting little more than confirmation that I was, in fact, Harry Potter of the House of Potter. Nothing more dramatic than that. But the moment my blood touched the runes carved into the bowl, something changed. At first it was subtle. A faint tremor ran through the stone basin, like a distant vibration traveling through ancient rock. The runes carved along its rim flickered once, dimly glowing crimson before fading again. Griphook frowned slightly, but said nothing. Then the second tremor came, stronger this time, and the runes flared to life all at once. Crimson light flooded the chamber. The bowl began to hum with a low vibration that I felt more in my bones than in my ears. Every goblin in the room stiffened instantly. I looked up, confused. "Is that supposed to happen?" I asked quietly. No one answered. Griphook leaned forward slowly, his sharp eyes narrowing as he studied the swirling blood inside the basin. The red liquid moved unnaturally, forming thin spirals that twisted like smoke caught in a jar. Symbols began to appear within the blood itself in tunes, forming and dissolving in rapid succession, as if the bowl were searching through centuries of history. I felt a sudden coldness crawl down my spine. Something about the magic in the air felt wrong, not dangerous exactly, but old. Much older than the spells we used at Hogwarts. "That is not possible," one of the goblins muttered behind me. Griphook ignored him. Instead, he reached beneath the table and pulled out a massive leather-bound ledger, so old the edges of its pages had turned almost black. Dust fell from the cover as he opened it. The humming of the basin grew louder. I glanced back down at the bowl, and for a moment, I swore the blood inside it was staring back at me. The runes began rearranging themselves rapidly, glowing brighter and brighter until the crimson light filled the entire chamber. My head started to ache, a dull pressure building behind my eyes, and then the visions began. They came, suddenly, violently, like memories forced into my mind from somewhere far away. I saw a mansion standing alone on a hill beneath a sky full of black storm clouds. Lightning flashed behind twisted iron gates shaped like skeletal hands. Candles burned inside tall Gothic windows, their green flames flickering in the wind. I heard laughter echoing through dark hallways, soft, amused laughter that carried the strange warmth of a family gathered together in the night. But the laughter was not cruel. It was not evil. It was comfortable, familiar, as though darkness itself was simply another form of home. The vision shifted. A long dining table lit by dozens of candles. Pale figures dressed in black sitting together, smiling calmly as thunder rolled outside the manor walls. Their eyes turned toward me all at once, and I felt something impossible. Recognition. My heart slammed against my ribs. The vision shattered instantly, throwing me back into the cold chamber beneath Gringotts. The basin erupted with light so bright I had to shield my eyes. The runes locked into place, slowly, deliberately. The blood formed a single word across the surface of the bowl. Addams. The chamber fell completely silent. The goblins stepped backward as one, their claws scraping against the stone floor. I could hear their quick whispers in their harsh language, filled with tension I didn't understand. My mouth felt dry. "What does that mean?" I asked. My voice sounded small in the massive underground chamber. Griphook did not answer immediately. He stared down at the glowing basin for a long moment before slowly turning the ancient ledger toward me. The page he had opened displayed a massive family tree drawn in black ink that had faded with age. Hundreds of names branched across the parchment like the limbs of a twisted forest. But one branch was darker than the rest, written in ink, so black it almost seemed to absorb the light around it. At the top of that branch was a name written in ornate script, House Addams. My eyes moved downward along the branch. Generations passed across the page, each name older than the last. Some had small notes written beside them, descriptions in goblin script marking strange magical abilities, unusual inheritances, and records of powerful artifacts tied to the family. But the branch ended abruptly near the bottom. Most of the names there were crossed out with thick black lines, extinct, lost, forgotten, until I reached the final name written at the very bottom of the page. My name, Harry James Potter. The ink was fresh, as though the ledger itself had written it moments ago. I felt my stomach twist. That can't be right, I whispered. Griphook finally spoke. His voice was careful now, controlled. Mr. Potter, he said quietly, the blood wards of Gringotts do not make mistakes. He tapped the glowing basin with one claw. Your blood carries the ancestral signature of the House of Addams. The humming in the bowl grew louder again. Something inside my chest stirred in response. I've never heard of them, I said. Griphook's thin lips curled slightly. Most wizards have not. He leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the ancient stones themselves might be listening. The Addams were not merely another old wizarding family. His claw traced the dark branch of the family tree slowly. They were something older. Another tremor ran through the basin. This time the light spread outward across the chamber walls, illuminating carvings I had not noticed before, symbols shaped like ravens, spiders, twisted trees, and ancient runic circles, older than the Ministry of Magic itself. My breathing slowed. The pressure behind my eyes returned, heavier now. Griphook closed the ledger with a heavy thud. For centuries the wizarding world pretended they never existed. He continued quietly. Their magic was considered unnatural. I swallowed. Dark magic. Griphook shook his head slowly. No. His eyes flicked toward the glowing bowl. Something much older than that. The blood inside the basin suddenly surged upward like a wave responding to an unseen tide. Shadows spilled from the runes and crawled across the stone table. I felt the same strange warmth from the vision earlier, the feeling of standing in a house that should have terrified me but instead felt strangely familiar. My pulse quickened. Somewhere deep inside my mind, a door I had never noticed before creaked open, and something on the other side of it smiled. Griphook stepped back carefully. For the first time since I had entered Gringotts, the goblin banker looked uneasy. Mr. Potter, he said slowly, there is something else you should know about the House of Addams. I forced myself to meet his eyes. What? The basin's light flared brighter than ever before. The shadows on the walls twisted into shapes that looked disturbingly like reaching hands. Griphook's voice dropped to a whisper. Their magic does not awaken through study. The shadows stretched toward me. It awakens through blood, and at that exact moment, I felt something inside me wake up. The first thing I felt when the magic awakened was not power, it was silence, a deep, ancient silence that spread through my mind like fog rolling across a graveyard. The glowing basin in front of me continued to pulse with crimson light, but the chamber around it seemed to fade, as if the world itself had stepped back to watch something unfold. My heartbeat slowed, each pulse heavy and deliberate. The strange warmth inside my chest expanded outward, threading through my veins like liquid shadow. I could feel the magic moving through my Nort like the spells I had learned at Hogwarts, which always felt like tools being picked up and used, but something far more personal. This felt like memory, as though my blood had been waiting centuries for this exact moment to remember what it was meant to do. Shadows spilling from the basin stretched farther across the stone table, crawling over the ancient carvings like living ink. I heard the goblins shifting nervously behind me, their claws scraping softly against the stone floor. Step back, one of them whispered to another. This is not normal inheritance magic. But Griphook did not move. His narrow eyes remained locked on me, studying every flicker of light and shadow like a historian witnessing the return of a forgotten empire. I looked down at my hands. At first nothing seemed different, just pale skin, slightly trembling fingers, the faint sting where the goblin blade had cut my finger earlier. But then the veins beneath my skin darkened, not black exactly, something deeper than black, like the color of a night sky just before a storm. The darkness pulsed once, twice, then faded again. I inhaled sharply. Did you see that? I asked. Griphook nodded slowly. Yes, his voice carried a strange mixture of awe and concern. The ancestral magic is responding. The words made something twist inside my chest. Responding to what? I asked quietly. Before he could answer, the basin erupted again. The blood rose into the air like a floating sphere, held together by invisible force. Runes circled it rapidly, forming rings of glowing symbols that spun faster and faster until they blurred into streams of crimson light. The pressure in my head returned instantly. This time it was stronger. Images burst across my mind. Without warning, a stormy coastline beneath a black sky, a massive stone manor standing against the wind, its towers sharp and crooked like broken fingers pointing toward the clouds. The iron gates creaked open slowly as though welcoming me home. I saw a long hallway lined with portrait spell faces watching from inside dark frames. their expressions calm and amused. None of them looked surprised to see me. One woman in particular stood out. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her long black dress trailing across the marble floor as she walked through the manor with elegant confidence. Her eyes were dark, but not empty. There was warmth there, and something fiercely protective. She stopped suddenly, turning her head toward me as if she could sense my presence across time itself. "Ah," she said softly, a faint smile forming. "The child has finally found us." The vision shattered again. I staggered backward, slightly, grabbing the edge of the stone table to steady myself. The floating sphere of blood collapsed back into the basin with a loud splash. The runes dimmed but did not disappear. Griphook was watching me more carefully now. "You are seeing them, aren't you?" he said quietly. I wiped sweat from my forehead, my breathing uneven. "The family, murmured the Addams. He nodded once. "The ancestral memory." My mind struggled to process what had just happened. "That woman," I said slowly. "Who was she?" Griphook turned the heavy ledger toward me again, flipping several brittle pages until he reached a section filled with ink portraits of ancient witches and wizards. One image immediately caught my eye. The same pale woman from the vision stared back from the page, her long black dress flowing around her like living shadow. Beneath the portrait was a name written in elegant script, Morticia Addams. My chest tightened strangely as I looked at the picture. Even as ink on old parchment, the calm intensity in her eyes felt familiar, like looking at someone who had been expecting me for a very long time. "One of the most powerful matriarchs of the House of Addams," Griphook explained quietly. "The family's magic often manifested strongest through its bloodline leaders." I glanced back. At the basin, the shadows around it had grown thicker, stretching slowly across the chamber floor like dark vines seeking sunlight. "Why would their magic appear in me?" I asked. Griphook's expression grew serious. "Because you are not simply related to them." His claw tapped the ledger again directly beside my name at the bottom of the family tree. "You are their heir." The words echoed heavily in the silent chamber. I stared at the page, trying to understand the weight of what he was saying, but the Potter's Griphook nodded. "Your father's line is correct. You are Harry Potter." His thin smile returned faintly. "But bloodlines in the wizarding world are rarely simple things." He turned several more pages in the ledger until a smaller branching line appeared beside the main Addams family tree. One name stood at the intersection between the two houses. "Charles Potter." "Several centuries ago," Griphook said, "one member of the Addams family married into the Potter lineage." I followed the branch downward slowly until it reached the modern generation. My name glowed faintly on the page, the ink still shimmering with fresh magic. "Most descendants lost the deeper traits of the Addams bloodline over time," the goblin continued. "But occasionally, the inheritance returns in full." A sudden gust of cold air swept through the chamber. The lantern flames flickered violently. I felt the warmth inside my chest surge again, stronger. This time, the shadows crawling across the floor suddenly stopped moving outward. Instead, they began moving toward me. Thin strands of darkness curled around my boots like curious fingers. The goblins backed away immediately. "Mr. Potter," one of them hissed nervously, "you must control it." I looked down at the shadows wrapping around my feet. Oddly enough, they didn't feel threatening. They felt loyal, like a dog recognizing its owner after years apart. The realization sent a shiver through me. "I'm not doing anything," I said. Griphook's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "Exactly." The shadows rose slightly higher, swirling around my legs like living smoke. The basin's runes began glowing again, brighter than before. "The Addams magic does not require wands," Griphook whispered. "It responds to presence." I swallowed slowly. "Presence?" He gestured toward the swirling darkness surrounding me. "The magic recognizes its heir." The chamber trembled faintly as if ancient stone foundations were shifting deep underground. Somewhere far beneath us, I heard the distant rumble of moving vault doors. Massive enchanted mechanisms reacting to something they had not sensed in centuries. The shadows tightened around my arms and shoulders before slowly dissolving back into the air. The basin's light faded to a soft crimson glow. Silence returned to the chamber once more. I exhaled shakily. "So, what happens now?" I asked. Griphook closed the ancient ledger with deliberate care. "Now," he said quietly, "we show you the vault your blood has just awakened." My stomach dropped slightly. "Another vault?" Griphook gave a thin smile. "Not just a vault." He turned towards the massive tunnel behind us, where deeper shadows swallowed the stone corridor. "The Addams vault has been sealed for nearly 200 years. The lantern flames flickered again, as if reacting to the words. Griphook's voice lowered to a near whisper. "Until today." For a long moment after Griphook spoke, none of us moved. The word vault seemed to linger in the cold air of the chamber like the final note of a bell echoing through a cathedral. I stared down at the obsidian basin where my blood had awakened something older than anything I had ever studied at Hogwarts. The crimson runes were dim now, their glow reduced to a faint heartbeat of light, pulsing slowly in the stone, but the feeling inside my chest had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. The magic moving through my veins felt awake now in a way that made my skin prickle. It was like walking into a dark room and realizing something inside it had already been watching you. I swallowed slowly and forced my eyes toward the tunnel Griphook had indicated. The corridor beyond the chamber stretched deep into the mountain, swallowed by shadows so thick they looked almost solid. I had been in Gringotts before. I had ridden the clattering underground carts, passed vault doors the size of castle gates, and seen enchantments older than the ministry itself. But this tunnel felt different. The air coming from it was colder, heavier, ancient. Why was it sealed? I asked quietly. My voice sounded small against the massive stone walls. Griphook stepped beside me, the lantern he carried casting long crooked shadows across the chamber floor. Because, he said carefully, the last time the Addams vault was opened, the wizarding world nearly buried it again out of fear. One of the goblins behind him shifted nervously. We should not be doing this, the creature muttered under its breath. Griphook ignored him. Instead, he gestured toward the tunnel. Come, Mr. Potter, the vault will not remain awake forever. I hesitated only a second before following him. The moment I stepped into the corridor, the air changed. The temperature dropped so sharply I could see faint clouds of breath forming in front of me. The stone walls here were older than the upper chambers, so old that the carved runes lining them had eroded into jagged shapes barely recognizable as symbols. Yet as I passed them, they began to glow one by one, faint at first. Then brighter, a crimson light crawled across the walls like veins awakening beneath stone skin. I froze mid-step. Griphook, the goblin, did not look surprised. Yes, he said calmly. They recognize you. The runes continued lighting up as I walked deeper into the tunnel, forming a long corridor of dim red symbols that stretched into the darkness ahead. It felt less like entering a vault and more like walking through the bones of something enormous and ancient. My heart beat faster with every step. What exactly did the Addams family keep in here? I asked. Griphook's lantern flickered as he walked. Records say the vault holds their inheritance. Gold? I asked. The goblin let out a short, dry laugh. Mr. Potter, if the Addams cared about gold, their house would still rule half the wizarding world. The tunnel curved sharply, and suddenly the passage opened into a cavern so vast my breath caught in my throat. The ceiling vanished into darkness high above us. Massive stone pillars carved with ancient sigils stretched toward the unseen roof like the trunks of petrified trees. At the far end of the cavern stood a door unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was enormous, easily 3 stories tall, carved from black metal that seemed to absorb the lantern light rather than reflect it. Twisting symbols covered its surface in dense spirals. Skulls, ravens, thorned vines, and strange runic circles overlapped each other in an intricate design that made my eyes ache if I looked too long. But what made my stomach tighten was the lock. There wasn't one. Instead, in the center of the door was a shallow stone basin shaped like an open hand. Griphook stopped walking. We have arrived. I stared at the door. That's the vault. Yes. My gaze moved slowly across. The massive carvings. It doesn't look like any vault I've seen. Griphook nodded. Because it is not protected by ordinary enchantments. The goblin raised the lantern higher, illuminating a long inscription carved across the door's surface in ancient runes. Even though I had never studied them before, I somehow understood them immediately. The words slid into my mind as if they had always been there. Only the blood that remembers may enter. My pulse quickened. That means, yes, Griphook said quietly. Only you can open it. The cavern fell silent again. Even the distant rumble of Gringotts machinery seemed to fade away as if the mountain itself were waiting. I approached the massive door slowly. The shadows along the cavern floor shifted as I walked, stretching toward me like long thin fingers drawn to warmth. I could feel the magic inside the vault pressing against the other side of the door. It was enormous, ancient, patient, like something that had been sleeping for centuries and had just begun to stir. My footsteps echoed loudly as I reached the stone basin in the center of the door. Up close, it was shaped perfectly like a human palm. Griphook stood several feet behind me now. Even he seemed cautious. Place your hand in the basin, he instructed. I hesitated, not out of fear exactly, but because the moment felt too large to rush. My mind flashed back to the visions I had seen earlier. The storm-covered manor, the dark halls, pale woman Morticia Addams turning toward me as though she had always known I would come. I took a slow breath, then I placed my hand in the stone imprint, for a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then the door screamed. The sound was not loud, but it was deep. A grinding metallic groan that echoed through the cavern like the shifting of tectonic plates. Crimson light exploded outward from beneath my hand, racing through the carvings across the entire door. The runes ignited one after another in blinding succession. The shadows around my feet surged upward violently. I felt the magic inside the vault answer my presence like thunder responding to lightning. The door trembled. Massive locks hidden deep within the stone mechanisms slammed open one by one with thunderous cracks. Behind me, the goblins stepped back quickly, by the old vaults. One of them whispered, the final lock, shattered with a deafening boom. Slowly the massive door began to open. Dust poured from the edges as the metal slabs shifted apart for the first time in centuries. A wave of cold air rushed out of the darkness beyond the threshold. It smelled faintly of candle wax, old parchment, and something strangely familiar. The shadows around me calmed instantly, settling back across the cavern floor like loyal servants awaiting command. I lowered my hand from the basin. The vault door continued opening slowly, revealing a darkness so deep it swallowed the lantern light entirely. I could not see what lay inside yet, but I could feel it. Hundreds of objects, ancient magic, artifacts, sleeping beneath layers of time. And somewhere in that darkness, something pulsed with the same strange warmth I felt in my veins. Griphook's voice broke the silence behind me. "Mr. Potter," he said softly, "welcome to the Addams inheritance." The darkness inside the vault did not behave like ordinary shadow. As the massive door groaned open and the ancient hinges screamed from centuries of disuse, the lantern light from Griphook's hand tried to spill into the chamber beyond, but the darkness swallowed it almost immediately. It wasn't simply the absence of light. It was deeper than that, thicker, like stepping into a room filled with ink. I stood motionless at the threshold, staring into the void that had just awakened for the first time in 200 years. The air that poured out from the vault carried a scent unlike anything I had smelled before. Old parchment, dried herbs, candle wax, and rain on stone. It felt strangely comforting, like entering a home you somehow remembered even though you had never been there before. Behind me, the goblins had stopped moving entirely. Even Griphook seemed cautious now, his lantern raised but his feet planted firmly outside the doorway. "You may proceed," he said quietly, "but only you." I glanced back at him. "You're not coming in." His narrow eyes reflected the dim crimson glow of the runes, still burning across the vault door. "Gringotts policy," he replied calmly. "When vault magic recognizes a blood heir, only the heir may enter first." That answer didn't make me feel better. I turned back toward the darkness. The strange warmth inside my chest pulsed again, stronger now that the door had opened. Whatever waited inside the vault knew I was here. I took a slow breath and stepped forward. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, the darkness moved. Not violently, not like an attack, more like a curtain parting to let someone pass. Shadows slid away from my path, revealing the faint outlines of the chamber beyond. Candles ignited one by one along the walls as I walked deeper inside. Their flames burned a soft green, casting an eerie but strangely elegant glow across the room. The vault was enormous, far larger than I had expected. It wasn't built like the treasure rooms I had seen before in Gringotts. Instead of piles of gold and towering stacks of artifacts, the chamber looked almost organized. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with ancient tomes. Bound in dark leather, long glass cases stood in rows across the polished black stone floor, each one displaying a single object resting carefully inside. The entire room looked less like a bank vault and more like a museum dedicated to something forbidden. My footsteps echoed softly as I moved further into the chamber. The shadows followed me, stretching across the floor in long, thin shapes that twisted and curled like living things reacting to my presence. I stopped beside the first glass case. Inside rested a ring. At first glance, it looked simple black metal with a deep crimson gemstone set into the center. But the moment my eyes focused on it, the stone flickered faintly like a heartbeat, and suddenly, I knew exactly what it was. The knowledge appeared in my mind without explanation, like a memory surfacing from deep water. The Ring of Nocturne, an ancestral focus used by the Addams bloodline to channel shadow magic without a wand. My breath caught in my throat. I had never studied anything like this at Hogwarts, yet somehow I understood it perfectly. I moved to the next case. A long silver dagger rested inside, its blade etched with thin, spiraling runes that shimmered faintly in the candlelight. Again the knowledge appeared instantly in my mind. The Thorn Blade, forged centuries ago to cut through magical constructs and curses that normal weapons could not touch. I swallowed slowly. How do I know this? I whispered to the empty chamber. The shadows rippled softly along the floor, as if answering. I turned slowly, taking in the rest of the vault. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of objects here. Old spellbooks bound in strange materials. Bottles filled with swirling liquids that glowed faintly in the dark. Masks carved from bone. Mechanical devices covered in delicate magical engravings. None of it looked chaotic or evil. Instead, it felt deliberate, careful, like the tools of a family that had spent centuries studying a very specific kind of magic. The warmth in my chest pulsed again. My eyes drifted toward the center of the vault. A single pedestal stood there beneath a tall arch of black stone. Unlike the other displays, this one wasn't covered by glass. A wooden box rested on the pedestal, its surface carved with the same twisted tree symbol I had seen earlier in the blood basin. My heartbeat quickened as I approached it. Something inside that box was calling to the magic in my veins. I reached the pedestal slowly. The shadows gathered around its base like silent witnesses. My fingers hovered above the lid for a moment before I finally lifted it. The hinges creaked softly as the box opened. Inside rested a small book bound in dark velvet. The cover was smooth and almost warm to the touch, its surface embroidered with silver thread forming the same family crest. The moment I picked it up, the entire vault reacted. Candles flared brighter. Shadows rippled violently across the floor. The book pulsed once in my hands like a living heart. Words began writing themselves across the first page in flowing black ink. To the heir of the House Addams. My throat felt suddenly dry. More words appeared beneath the first line, forming slowly as though the book itself were thinking carefully about what to say. If you are reading this, then the bloodline has awakened once more. The ink continued moving across the page. For centuries our family studied the oldest form of magic, the magic that exists before light and shadow became enemies. We did not seek domination, only understanding. I turned the page slowly, my pulse racing. The handwriting changed slightly here, becoming more elegant, more familiar. Magic is not divided into dark and light, as the ministry teaches. The words continued. It is divided only by intention. I froze. A memory flashed across my mind again, Morticia Addams standing in the candlelit hallway of the manor from my vision, the calm certainty in her eyes. I looked back down at the page. The final line appeared slowly, the ink shimmering faintly. And now, the House of Addams belongs to you. The book snapped shut in my hands with a loud crack. The candles flickered violently as a wave of ancient magic rolled through the vault. I stood there in stunned silence, the small velvet book clutched tightly in my grip. Behind me, the massive vault door still stood open. Griphook's lantern glow flickered faintly from the cavern outside. I took a slow breath, staring down at the crest on the cover of the book. Somewhere deep inside the vault, something else shifted, something much larger than the artifacts surrounding me, and for the first time since entering the chamber, I realized the inheritance of the Addams family might not be limited to objects at all. The moment the book snapped shut in my hands, the entire vault seemed to breathe. It was the only way I could describe it. The candles along the walls flickered in unison, their green flames bending toward me as if responding to a sudden shift in the air. Shadows slid across the polished stone floor like dark water stirred by an unseen current. For a long moment I simply stood there, staring at the velvet-covered grimoire resting in my palms. The silver crest embroidered on its cover shimmered faintly in the candlelight, the twisted tree symbol of the House Addams. I could feel the magic inside the book, not violently, not like the dangerous, cursed artifacts we had studied warnings about at Hogwarts. This magic felt patient, ancient, as though the book had been waiting centuries for the right hands to hold it again. My heartbeats slowly steadied as I opened the cover once more. This time the pages did not write immediately. They waited. Blank parchment stretched before me, thick and slightly yellowed with age. The silence in the vault grew deeper, broken only by the faint crackle of candle flames. I turned the page, still blank. Another page. Nothing. A strange thought crossed my mind then, rising naturally as though someone had whispered it quietly into my thoughts. Speak. I frowned slightly. Speak, I murmured aloud. The moment the word left my mouth, black ink burst across the parchment like spreading shadows. Lines formed quickly, elegant handwriting flowing across the page in long, confident strokes. I leaned closer to read. The first lesson of our house is simple, the book wrote. Magic listens. I felt a small shiver crawl down my spine. The words continued forming beneath the first line. The wizarding world teaches that magic must be forced into shape through wands and incantations. They believe it must be controlled. The ink paused briefly before continuing. They are wrong. The candle flames flickered brighter. Shadows along the floor stretched toward me again, curling around the pedestal like curious creatures. I swallowed slowly and read the next line. True magic does not obey commands, it answers presence. My chest tightened slightly as the warmth inside my veins pulsed again. I remembered what Griphook had said in the cavern. The magic recognizes its heir. My fingers tightened around the edges of the book. So what does that mean? I asked quietly. The ink appeared again, almost instantly. It means the magic that lives in shadow has always been waiting for you. A soft sound echoed somewhere in the vault behind me. I turned quickly, my heart jumping. The shadows along the far wall had grown thicker, swirling slowly around one of the display cases like a silent storm. I stepped closer, still holding the book. The object inside the case was unlike the others. Instead of a tool or weapon, it looked like a small mechanical device, an intricate metal hand about the size of my own palm. Each finger was made from delicate, silver joints, crafted with surprising precision. The metal glimmered faintly as the shadows circled it. Once again the knowledge appeared in my mind without explanation. The name felt oddly natural, as if it had always belonged there. I blinked in confusion. That's a hand, I said slowly. The book in my other hand grew warm again. New words formed across the page. Not merely a hand, a companion. Before I could question that strange explanation, the glass case cracked. The sound was small but sharp in the quiet vault. Thin fractures spread across the surface of the display like spiderwebs. Then the glass shattered completely. I instinctively stepped back as fragments clattered against the stone floor. The small silver hand dropped from the case and landed softly on the ground. For a moment it lay perfectly still. Then one finger twitched. My eyes widened. The hand slowly pushed itself upright, its metal fingers flexing experimentally against the floor like a spider testing its legs. I stared in stunned silence as the mechanical hand turned toward me. It tilted slightly, as though studying my face. Then it scuttled forward. I nearly dropped the book as it climbed up onto the pedestal with surprising speed. The tiny metal fingers tapped against the stone twice, almost like a greeting. I blinked again. You've got to be joking, I whispered. The hand paused, then tapped the pedestal again with 2 quick knocks. Somewhere deep in the vault, a faint echo of quiet laughter seemed to ripple through the shadows. I looked back down at the book. More ink had appeared across the page. Every house requires loyal servants. The Addams simply prefer unusual ones. I glanced back at the small mechanical hand now perched beside the book. It tilted again, as though proudly acknowledging the description. My brain struggled to process what was happening. So it's alive, I asked slowly. The book answered. Alive is a matter of perspective. Before I could respond, the shadows across the vault shifted again, this time more dramatically. A deep vibration rolled through the stone floor beneath my feet. The candles flickered violently. The little hand froze instantly, its fingers tightening against the pedestal as if sensing something approaching. I felt the warmth in my veins surge again, stronger than before. Something inside the vault had just awakened. The shadows along the far wall began pulling away from the stone like curtains drawn back by invisible hands. Slowly, a hidden section of the vault revealed itself. My breath caught in my throat. An enormous object rested in the darkness behind the shifting shadows. At first I could only see its outline. Long, elegant, carved from black wood, polished smooth with age. It looked almost like a coffin. The shadows continued sliding away until the entire object was revealed. My heart began pounding, because it wasn't just a coffin, it was a throne. A Gothic throne carved with the same twisted tree symbol of the Addams family, its tall back rising like the branches of a dark forest. The moment my eyes focused on it, the warmth in my chest flared into something almost electric. The book in my hands snapped shut again with a loud crack. The little metal hand beside it tapped the pedestal once more, this time much more urgently. I took a slow step toward the throne. The shadows followed me again, swirling gently around my feet like obedient servants guiding their master forward. I could feel the magic calling to me now, stronger than anything I had felt since entering the vault. Not threatening, not hostile, but powerful beyond anything I had imagined. The closer I came to the throne, the louder the pulse in my veins became. It felt like standing beside a massive heart beating somewhere deep beneath the earth. I stopped a few feet away from the dark seat. The entire vault had gone silent again. Even the candle flames had grown perfectly still. I stared at the throne for several long seconds before finally whispering the only thought that made sense. This is mine. The shadows rippled softly across the floor. The book in my hands warmed again, and somewhere deep inside the ancient vault, something answered. For a long moment, I simply stood there staring at the throne. The silence inside the vault had become so deep that even the faint movement of candle flames sounded loud against the ancient stone walls. The black throne loomed before me like something carved directly from night itself. Its tall back twisted upward into sharp branches, each one etched with runes so old they looked less like carvings and more like scars in the wood. The symbol of the Addams family, the crooked tree I had seen in the blood basin and on the Grimoire at the center of the throne's backrest, glowing faintly as if responding to my presence. The warmth in my veins pulsed harder the longer I stared at it, not painfully, but insistently, like a heartbeat trying to guide my steps. The little silver hand thing scrambled across the pedestal and climbed onto my shoulder with surprising speed. Its tiny metal fingers tapped lightly against my collar as if urging me forward. I glanced at it uncertainly. "You want me to sit in that?" I whispered. Thing tapped twice. Somewhere behind me the shadows rippled again, curling along the floor like smoke drifting toward the throne. It was almost as if the entire vault expected me to take the final step. I exhaled slowly and approached the throne. The closer I moved, the stronger the magic around it became. It pressed gently against my senses like invisible wind. By the time I reached the base of the platform where the throne rested, my heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. I hesitated only a moment before climbing the short stone steps. The wood of the throne looked impossibly dark up close, so polished it reflected the green candlelight like black glass. I ran my fingers lightly across one of the carved branches. The moment I touched it, the runes along the throne flared to life. Crimson light raced through the engravings like lightning racing through tree roots. I jerked my hand back instinctively. Behind me, I heard a faint shout from the cavern entrance. "Mr. Potter," Griphook's voice echoed across the vault chamber. "What is happening in there?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the moment the runes ignited, the visions returned. This time they were stronger than before. The world around me vanished as if someone had torn away the walls of the vault. I was standing on a hill beneath a black sky filled with storm clouds. Wind whipped through tall iron gates behind me, their twisted bars creaking softly as they swayed. In front of me stood the manor I had glimpsed earlier in my visions, the Addams estate. Its towers stretched upward into the storm like crooked fingers reaching toward the lightning flashing overhead. Candlelight glowed from its windows, warm, inviting, alive. I felt a strange certainty settle in my chest. I had been here before, not physically, but through the memories of the bloodline flowing inside me. The gates creaked open slowly as I stepped forward. Gravel crunched beneath my feet as I walked toward the enormous front doors of the manor. Thunder rolled across the sky above. The doors opened before I could even reach them. The hallway inside was exactly as I remembered from the earlier vision: long marble floors, towering candle stands, and rows of old portraits lining the walls. Each painting contained a member of the Addams family, their pale faces calm and dignified. As I walked past them, their eyes followed me, not with suspicion, with quiet curiosity. One portrait showed a tall man with a thin mustache and dark hair slicked neatly back. He leaned casually against a chair, smiling faintly. His eyes seemed to brighten when he saw me. "Ah," the man said pleasantly from inside the painting. "The heir finally arrives." I stopped walking. "You can see me?" I asked. The man chuckled softly. "Of course." He gestured lazily toward the other portraits lining the hallway. "We all can." I turned slowly. Every painted figure along the walls had shifted slightly within their frames, watching me with calm interest. A woman in a long black dress stepped forward inside her portrait frame. I recognized her immediately. Morticia Addams, her pale face held the same serene smile I remembered from my earlier vision. "Welcome home," she said gently. My throat felt tight. Suddenly, I don't understand," I admitted. Morticia's dark eyes softened slightly. "You will." She glanced toward the end of the hallway. "But first, the house must recognize you." I followed her gaze. At the far end of the corridor stood a large door carved with the same twisted tree crest I had seen everywhere else. The moment my eyes focused on it, the warmth in my veins surged again. I knew instinctively what waited behind it, the heart of the Addams magic. The door creaked open slowly. A massive chamber stretched beyond its walls, lined with towering shelves of spellbooks and artifacts older than Hogwarts itself. But what drew my attention immediately was the throne standing at the center of the room, the exact same throne I had just touched in the vault. My breath caught in my throat. Morticia's voice drifted softly from the hallway behind me. "Every house has a seat of power," she said. "Ours remembers every heir who has ever claimed it." I walked slowly toward the throne. The entire chamber seemed to hum with quiet anticipation. My footsteps echoed softly across the marble floor until I reached the base of the platform. For a moment I hesitated, but then I heard the faint tapping of things, metal fingers against my shoulder again, encouraging. I took a breath and sat down. The moment I did, the world exploded with shadow. Magic surged through my body like a tidal wave breaking through a dam. The throne's runes ignited, with blinding crimson light. Every candle in the manor burst into brilliant green flame. The portraits along the walls straightened instantly. Morticia smiled softly as she watched from the hallway. The man with the mustache laughed quietly in his frame. I gripped the arms of the throne as the ancient power of the Addams bloodline flooded through my veins, and somewhere far away in the real vault beneath Gringotts' grip hook, and the goblins felt the mountain tremble, because the throne had just accepted its heir.